2 Kings, the 13th chapter. 2 Kings 13. The events that we're going to talk about today took place in the year 798 BC. We'll begin to read verse number 14. Now Elisha was taken sick of the sickness wherewith he died, or how Elisha died was the sickness that he's talking about. We don't know what that is. I mean, he was 87 years old at the time. It could be old age, whatever. But whatever it was, it took his life. And Joash, the king of Israel, came down unto him and wept over his face and said, O my father, the chariot of Israel and the horsemen thereof. And Elisha said unto him, Take bow and arrows. And he took unto him bow and arrows. And he said to the king of Israel, Put thine hand upon the bow. And he put his hand upon it. And Elisha put his hand upon the king's hand. And he said, Open the window eastward. And they opened it. And then he loss of space. Then he said, The arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. I think that's all we're going to read. As the story goes, Joash was an evil king. The kings of Israel all were unrighteous before the Lord. At this time, there were two different kingdoms, the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Judah, about half of their kings were righteous before the Lord, about half of them were not. But in Israel, all of them were not. And they led their people into the same type of sin that they had. Elisha had been prophesying against the people of the king and the people of Israel. And they had been just dogged, if I can say that, by Syria for years. Some of the battles against Syria they had won, primarily the ones that they had help from Elisha. But there were also many more that they had lost. Syria was the number one enemy to the kingdom of Israel at this time. And the Syrians sought to totally exterminate the kingdom of Israel. Now, Elisha was sick. Elisha's home was located very near the meeting point of the kingdom of Israel and Judah and Syria, kind of that three-corner type thing. And so Elisha's house was right there. He was sick, and so Joash had heard that he was sick, so he came to give his regards and to see how sorry he was. Now, which was quite unusual. Joash being certainly not a strong believer in the God of his fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but yet he wanted to pay this homage to this great man of God, this prophet. Now, notice what Elisha did. Joash was the king. Elisha was subject to the king. This could have been the greatest honor from a human standpoint that Elisha would have ever received. Consider yourself, whether you voted for your present administrative people, your existing president, prime minister, or not. If you were to get a phone call and say, we're coming to your house, that would be an honor, right? And you would clean the house and put new sheets on the bed and make sure that your refrigerator has what is needed for snacks or dinner or whatever. It would be a great honor. And I think that that's the same throughout history. But in this case, look what happened. Joash came down to Elisha's home. Thank you, Pastor. He came down to Elisha's home, and first thing he did is threw his body on this sick prophet. And he cried and he wept and all of these things to show Elisha just how much he was going to miss him and how sorrowful he was of this sickness. But how did Elisha respond? He did not say thank you. He didn't pat him on the head. That's okay, but I appreciate your concern. None of that. Elisha told the king of Israel, his king, his monarch over him, he looked up without even saying thank you and says, go get your bow and arrows. Wow. Oh, okay. He says, now what I want you to do is take this bow and arrow and shoot an arrow out of my east window. Oh, thank you, my brother. By shooting this arrow out of the east window, when the arrow hit, it would be in the land of Syria. Now, Joash was a signer or a supporter of a treaty that was called the Peace of Karnak. It was actually brokered by Ramses the Great back in the 15th century. Ramses the Great meaning the Pharaoh of Egypt. And it set a standard of war, that there's certain things you can do, certain things you cannot. Here in this world that we're living in today, most countries have signed off on the Treaty of Oslo, the Oslo Accord. Thank you so much, my brother. And the Geneva Convention. That regulates the standards of war that we have in the world today. So any nation who has signed off, not only did they sign on their behalf, but for their nation from that time forward, that they would abide by these rules of war. It established the fact that that innocents should be protected. The war was against the military of those countries, not against the people. ISIS hadn't figured that out yet. And so these parameters of how to wage war was established by Ramses for a more humane type of war and a conquest and a campaign. And with this Peace of Karnak, the kings of Judah and in Israel, and then before there was divided, the king of all of the Jews, were signers of this. There were only 3 monarchs that did not sign the Peace of Karnak. One was David, the king of the Jews. The second was Nebuchadnezzar, the emperor of Babylon. And the third was Alexander the Great. Those 3 guys says, we will not sign this agreement, and we will do what we want to do when we want to do it concerning our military strategies. We don't have to have rules to go by. And they didn't. Throughout their campaigns, they did things that would not have been acceptable in the Peace of Karnak. But Joash was a signer of it. So were the other all the kings of Judah and all the kings of Israel. They signed it. And so that set those standards. Now, these are the standards, is that along the border of each one of the countries who signed, they allowed them to place watchtowers. And these watchtowers were to serve as observation points to see whether there was an invasion or whatever the case may be. But it was also at that point that is where you declared war. And you declared war at this particular type of watchtower. And King Bert, if you will come up here, if you will, and be a country. Okay, I am the king of this country. The borderline runs between us, and within sight of a watchtower. Now, I want to declare war against him. And so what I do, I go to the border where the watchtower is located, the observation tower, and from my territory, I shoot an arrow over into his territory. Now, when that hits, then the person who is in the observation tower, he runs to the king, wherever that may be, and tells him, we have just been declared war from me, from this country. So now, his representatives and my representatives, according to the Peace of Karnak, we now have 40 days to try to resolve the issue. The issue was, well, why are you declaring war upon me? What have I done to you? Have I offended you? And so those negotiations go on. How much money do I have to give to you to go away? And this type of thing. Now, according to the principles of the Peace of Karnak, me being the aggressor, I can demand from the one who was abused or was declared war upon, I can demand of him 3 cities, not of my choosing, but 3 cities of his choosing. And to do that would be that if he gave me those cities, then I will be satisfied. Those cities would become mine. Those people would become my people, and they automatically would become Ronites rather than Birdites. Okay. So, the way to do that was at the end of this 40 days, if there had not been a resolve, then King Bert and King Ron will go to the border, and there'll be a tent or some type of facility set up that spans the border. Now, I, as the aggressor, and I'm the king who wants to declare war on Bertsville, I take my arrows. One represents myself as monarch. One represents my ancestry or my lineage, my successors. And the third one represents my people. And I will take those. And on the border, I will slap 3 times on the ground with those arrows. Now, if King Bert doesn't want to have problems, and he's willing to be satisfied with that, then he will take his arrows, representing the same thing, and he will hit the ground 3 times. That means he approves of the minimum provisions of the Peace of Karnak. And then after that, we kiss on each cheek, and he goes back to his home, and I go back to my home. Everyone's satisfied. Within 30 days, then Bertsville becomes Ronsville of the 3 cities that he chooses to give to me. Now, if I don't want that, I want a little bit more territory than what he's obligated to give as the minimum. So I take the same arrows and I hit the ground 4 times. Now he has the answer. If he hits the ground 3 times, it says, I will not fight you. But with my 4 arrows, it means that I will gladly take the 3 that you're going to give me, but I'm going to seize 5 more. If he slaps the ground 3 times, he said, okay, I will not defend you. I will not defend those cities. So whatever happens will happen. If I'm very aggressive, I'll take my arrows and I'll hit the ground 5 times, which means not only do I want those 3 that you're going to give to me, but I will try to get 10 more from your territory. Now King Bert has to make a decision. If he's disgusted with war, he'll take his arrows, he'll hit the ground 3 times. And he says, we are not prepared for war, so go ahead. It's up to the individual city to protect themselves as best they can. Now, if I'm really aggressive and I really hate him, big time hate, then I will take my arrows and I will hit the ground 6 times. And with those 6 times, it says this, I am going to invade you. I'm going to take every village, every town, every city, and lay waste your land. And it'd be as if you never even existed. Now he has to make a decision. If he responds by hitting the ground only 3 times, then that means I'm going home and packing. I'm on my way out of here. But if he strikes the ground 6 times, then he says, I will defend my country. I'll defend it against your aggression, and we'll see the best man who wins. Okay, thank you. So what Elisha was doing, he was challenging Joash to do what needed to be done with Syria based on the rules of war that was accepted at that time. Now, Elisha was sick. He couldn't get up and do this. But he did tell, as a symbolic gesture, he says, okay, Joash, shoot the arrow out of my east window. And he did, and the arrow landed in Syria, which basically says Joash has declared war on Syria. Now, if the Syrians were in a position that they really didn't want to bother with this any longer, then they could receive, they would give the 3 cities back to Joash, and he would be satisfied. It's the bare minimum that your enemy has to offer, then I will accept. And so symbolically, this is what Elisha told him. He said, take the arrows and strike them on the ground, because now we are talking about deliverance from Syria. Joash knew exactly what he was talking about. Elisha had already told him. So he knew what the connotations were. He knew what the striking of the arrows meant. And he knew that if he believed in Elisha, which he said he did, and if he believes the standards of war, then truly he could bring to a halt the aggression of Syria from that time on. Joash took the arrows and he slapped them on the ground 3 times and then stopped. And Elisha went ballistic. Why did you do that? Why didn't you hit the ground at least 4 times? If you hit it 5 times, you'll be taking a good portion of their land. And if you hit it 6 times, God would deliver you from Syria completely, and you would never have to be bothered by them again forever. But now that you've only hit the ground 3 times, then you will only be successful 3 times. You'll get the bare minimum that's offered by your enemy, and you have to live with that. Right now, Syria, and most recently Syria and Iran, are Israel's most powerful enemy. They're the ones that are trying the hardest to exterminate Israel. They're Israel's most powerful, most aggravating, and most forceful enemy that they have at this moment. Now, Israel has beaten everyone in the region. They've defeated the Lebanons. They've defeated the Jordanians. They've defeated the Syrians or the Egyptians. They've defeated the Libyans. And even throughout history, the same way. And everyone has defeated the Syrians. The Persians defeated them. The Greeks defeated them. The Romans defeated them. The Crusaders defeated them. The Arabs after that defeated them. The Turks defeated them. Even the British, when they were there, defeated the Syrians. They became the doormat of everybody that came into the area that was at least strong or stronger than them. They defeated everyone. Everyone defeated them except Israel. In all of the years from that time, Joash to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Syrians have never been defeated by the Israelis. Never. And it goes back to this decision that this king made at this time. How long would it have taken Joash to hit the ground 6 times? 2 seconds? 3 seconds? And so a decision that one man made, one man, 2,700 years ago, we're still fighting Syria. And they are the greatest threat to Israel's security right now, on this day, on this Sunday, on this year, in this century. Because a king, when the opportunity was presented to him, chose not to make a 3-second decision. You can say, well, he was a king. His word carried clout. Well, you know what? You are a king's kid. You are an heir, and you are a joint heir with Jesus. You are the most beloved creature in the entire universe. And what you say is just as powerful as Joash. I'm standing in the midst of
God's Widow's Farm, which is actually a local phenomenon around here. And what you're seeing are the grapes that come from this farm. Before God gave us this acreage, originally 6 acres, now 10 acres, this plot of land was producing about 1 ton of produce or grapes or whatever it was producing, about 1 ton an acre. But what has made this so phenomenal is that we're now averaging between 9 and 10 tons an acre on whatever is planted. Now, you see the grapes here, but we also raise eggplant, both black and yellow eggplant. There's corn, okra, squash. We have tomatoes, apricots, mangoes, and with the onions and grapes and onions and garlic and leeks, and it's just phenomenal. And what we do, we produce this, and the widows get the first crops, and we satisfy their needs first, and then once the widows are satisfied with the fresh produce, then we sell it, the remainder. And with the money that we get from the produce that we sell at market, then we can buy them blankets and shoes and school supplies and clothes and things like that they need. And if they need to go to the doctor, then we can pay for their doctor's visit, dentist visits, and so forth. And so this God's Widow's Farm produces all of that. We're supporting about 1,200 widows a month, plus their children, and it's just absolutely phenomenal what God is doing here, and it's actually beyond belief the type of produce that comes off of this farm, and it's just, and there's no chemicals, no preservatives that goes into anything. It's just absolutely wonderful, and the taste is, again, phenomenal.
God's Widow's Farm is made possible by supporters of the Cubit Foundation. You can help today by visiting cubitfoundation.org and give your gift of hope today.